Welcome back. G20 leaders had their meeting in Osaka, Japan over the weekend. The meeting analysts look forward to as a defining moment for the U.S., China, and for Iran. They look forward to peaceful resolution, or at least a path to peaceful resolution of the trade war between the U.S. and China, and more subtle disposition between the U.S. and Iran. President Donald Trump appeared as the real diplomat on both issues, dousing expectations that tensions between the U.S. and both countries will go any higher. Speaking of China.
World leaders began arriving at the G20 summit in Osaka, Japan, welcomed by Japan's Prime Minister, Mr. Shinzo Abe. Inside the conference hall, leaders anxiously await the outcome of a bilateral meeting between the U.S. and China, the world's two biggest economies, which have been engrossed in a trade war. By Saturday, leaders of both countries agreed to restart trade talks, holding off new tariffs on Chinese exports, signaling a pause in the trade hostilities between the two. The truce offered relief from a nearly year-long trade standoff in which the two countries have slapped tariffs on billions of dollars of each other's imports, disrupting global supply lines, rolling markets, and dragging on global economic growth. The U.S. President Donald Trump gave the news at a press conference on the sidelines of the G20 summit.
Basically, we agreed today that we were going to continue the negotiation, which I ended a while back, and we're going to continue the negotiation. We agreed that I would not be putting tariffs on the $325 billion that I would have the ability to put on if I wanted. We're fairly advanced, depending on where you want to look at and where you want to start. Pretty advanced. We did discuss numerous other things. We mentioned Huawei. I said we'll have to save that till the very end. We'll have to see.
The Chinese President Xi Jinping, during his speech, called on countries to explore driving forces for growth, improve global governance, remove development bottlenecks, and properly address differences, while pledging China's commitment to further opening up. Analysts think this shows China's determination to uphold multilateralism and stable economic system.
President Xi Jinping gave a very important speech during the G20 summit in Osaka, which outlines the role that China is playing in stabilizing the world economy in a period during which international concern derives from the continuous trade war. China wants to preserve multilateralism and globalization, and at the same time it shows the world that it is continuing its reform and opening up process.
The resumption of talks and pausing of tariffs will be seen in the short term as positive for markets and American businesses. Leaders now look forward to the next G20 summit in Saudi Arabia in 2020.
Mr. Johnson Chukwu joins us now. He's in Lagos. He's on Skype. Mr. Chukwu, thank you for joining us on Diplomatic Channel.
My pleasure.
What do you make of the U.S. President's decision to delay tariffs on Chinese goods, especially after announcing before the tariffs as much as $200 billion, before announcing tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, and then China also almost promising at least the same amount on U.S. goods?
For me, it's a repetition of the truce that was reached between China and U.S. Between December and March this year. Between December 2018 and March this year. We know the erratic nature of Donald Trump as the president of the U.S. Consistently, he has come up with this kind of arrangement where he pushes China to the extreme end and then turns back and enters some level of truce. But the reality is that I think the U.S. president is using this trade war as a tool to prepare for the 2020 presidential election in the U.S. So it's actually swinging in the pendulum in both directions, so as to not whip up sentiment while trying to pull or push China into a negotiation, a tight corner. That's how we say it. But China has always been willing to negotiate with the US.
So the last of President Trump's tariffs was hard-hitting on Huawei. which is a technology and communications firm. President Trump has backtracked on the ban on Huawei. Is that a good idea for both parties?
Yes, I think it's a good idea because the ban on Huawei is going to have multiplier effects on the consumption of telecommunication services globally. As well know, Huawei is the second biggest smartphone manufacturer in the world. Huawei is ahead of the curve in the development of 5G technology. So restricting Huawei, including Huawei in the list of companies that U.S. companies must get a license for the trade with, and also sending an executive order that bans the U.S. companies from patronizing foreign telecommunication companies that have full national security is actually an overkill. So the U.S. government also recognizes that, look, restricting Huawei has also implications on its own domestic economy.
Now, economists such as yourself, Mr. Chukwu, have been examining the impacts of the tariffs on both sides, both for the United States and for China, and the impacts this would have also on the world economy, especially for Nigeria. Have there been far-reaching consequences of the tariffs that have been imposed so far? And would there be further consequences if the current tariffs had pulled through?
Yes. Certainly, if you look at what has happened to the U.S. domestic economy as a result of the sanctions, for instance, the consumer goods in U.S. economy has increased by about $3 billion monthly as a result of the sanctions on imposed or the tariffs imposed on Chinese imports. Again, there has been a depression, according to figures from some of the agencies, a depression in demand by about $1.2 billion monthly in consumption as it relates to U.S. consumption in the U.S. as a result of the tariff imposed on the U.S. goods. But globally, if you have a depression in demand, the implication that the demand for consumer goods or input materials, including raw input materials, crude oil, will also be depressed. And that's why you've seen a pullback in crude price from the lower $70 per barrel to $60 barrel range as a result of the depression. If not for the crisis in Iran, between Iran and U.S., probably we should be talking of crude price in the region of $55 now, as a result of the depression in demand occasioned by the tariff imposed on Chinese goods by the U.S. government. So globally, we're going to have direct impact in the U.S., the impact in China, because we're also seeing the depression in Chinese exports and Chinese production, including the confidence level of manufacturers in China. And then globally, we are seeing a slowdown in demand for input material. So the tariff on China has a global implication on the general global economy.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned Iran, because the tension between the U.S. and Iran, of course, has got the whole world worrying about what should be done. And some analysts say that this is good for Nigeria because it means that our oil will once again be sought after. Has that been the case?
Well, it has had some impact on the demand for crude oil or the price of crude oil. If you look at what I mentioned earlier, we saw a crude oil price trading in the $70 range per barrel. And as a result of the between the U.S. and China, we saw that crude price up to the lower 60s. As a result of the crisis we now have between the U.S. and Iran, with the U.S. restoring sanctions on Iran and trying to compel Iran, during the heightened of the tension with the shooting down of an unmanned U.S. drone by the Iran, we've seen an escalation of tension, which has led to a threat of supply of crude from that region. The impact has been an increase in crude price. So for Nigeria, it's a positive development, but we hope that it doesn't escalate to a full-blown war that could depress demand and also create a lot of confusion within the region.
I want you to talk about the U.S. position on these issues and how that is affecting the rest of the world, because you have China, which has been the target of much of U.S. rhetoric when it comes to economy and so on. You have China talking about upholding multilateralism at the G20, and the UN confirming that China has always upheld multilateralism and then a global stable economic system. Why is it up to China to achieve this when you have the largest economy in the world, which is the U.S., trying to sabotage that?
Yeah, interestingly, global trade in the world actually supports China more than any other country in the world. China is a net export to the global economy. And it's now, as a result of the global influence as it relates to export of goods to almost all the economies in the world, China has a more compelling need to push for a free market economy, to remove restrictions or barriers to trade. If you really look at the trade between China and the US, for instance, in 2018, China exported goods worth $539 billion and imported only goods worth $120 billion from the US. So the implication that any trade restriction, any bottleneck in international trade will affect China more than it will affect other countries in the world. So China has a more compelling need to be a campaigner for free trade globally, unlike what we used to have, because they are the greatest beneficiary when it comes to global trade today.
Mr. Johnson Chukwu, thank you again for speaking with us on Diplomatic Channel.
My pleasure.
This is it on Diplomatic Channel this week. I look forward to your comments and questions. You can reach me on @Amarachi_Ubani and @DiplomaticChan on Twitter. I'll see you next time.